Is the Ukraine-Russia war converging with the war against Iran? That is the subject of our video today. And it's all based on some stuff that's happened in the last couple of days. Let's just get right to the headlines. No reason to give more of an introduction. Let's get to it. Iran says Ukrainian attack on vessel in Caspian Sea killed sailor. What is this about? Iran's foreign ministry condemned on Saturday, 2 days ago, a Ukrainian attack on an Iranian commercial vessel in the Caspian Sea, saying it resulted in an explosion that killed one sailor and injured another. So there's an Iranian commercial vessel, so they say, in the Caspian Sea, and Ukraine attacked it. Throughout the war in Ukraine, Kiev has had to counter Iranian-designed drones deployed by Moscow. Okay, so the Russians have been using Iranian drones. Kiev has offered its drone interception expertise to countries in the Middle East that have suffered strikes from Iran. Tehran described the attack on its vessel as an act of aggression and said it would defend its national interests and security, while accusing Kiev of seeking to expand the war in Ukraine. The Iranian Foreign Ministry summoned Ukraine's chargé d'affaires in Tehran to convey its protest over what it described as a, quote, hostile and criminal attack, Iran's state news agency IRNA reported. The Iranian denunciation coincided with comments by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky that Kiev had noted Russia was passing on its satellite observations in the Middle East to Iran to enable it to detect strikes in the region. So Zelensky made this announcement the other day, we'll get more into it soon, that the Russians have been helping Iran with satellite info. Zelensky had earlier said that Ukraine's forces struck a Russian warship and vessels used for transporting Iranian-leaked military cargo in the Caspian Sea. So this is a separate incident that Zelensky had mentioned, that, again, a Russian warship that was transporting Iranian-linked military cargo, Iranian-linked. The Ukrainian president, in subsequent remarks posted on X, said Kiev had recorded since the beginning of July, quote, active Russian satellite surveillance of the Gulf states and U.S. military facilities located there. These images subsequently appear in Iran. At the same time, there's a clear correlation between Russia's satellite imagery of these sites and Iranian strikes, both before the attacks, in preparation for them, and afterward to assess the damage inflicted, Zelensky said. So Zelensky is alleging that the successful Iranian attacks on some U.S. military targets in the Middle East of late, and we know that a few American servicemen have been killed, were that in those attacks, the Iranians made use of intelligence supplied to them by the Russians. He said that on July 19th and 20th alone, Russian satellite observation had included 4 air bases, 2 in Bahrain, 1 in Jordan, and 1 in Kuwait. Okay, and here we have that other event. Ukraine says it hit Russian warship and ships used for Iran-linked military cargo in the Caspian. Okay, and here's Iran's response to all this. Iran raises Caspian Sea ship attack with EU. This was posted yesterday. Iran's foreign minister discussed the military attack on an Iranian commercial vessel in the Caspian Sea during a phone call with the European Union's foreign policy chief, condemning the incident and calling for a strong response from the UN Security Council. The EU, and the international community. Separately, Iran's foreign ministry summoned Ukraine's chargé d'affaires to protest the attack. According to Iran's foreign ministry, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi described the attack on an Iranian commercial vessel as a criminal act and called for those responsible to be held accountable. Meanwhile, Iran's foreign ministry announced that Ukraine's chargé d'affaires had been summoned by Manouchehr Moradi, Assistant Foreign Minister and Director General for Eurasia, and he conveyed their protest. The ministry reiterated that Iran has not been a party to the Russia-Ukraine conflict and called on the UN Security Council, European countries, and UN member states to take a responsible stance and hold those responsible for the attack accountable. Now, they claim it was a commercial vessel, and even in this Reuters account, it didn't say that it was anything other than a commercial vessel. It just said that in addition to striking this commercial vessel, they've also been concerned about weaponry going between Iran and Russia. But take a look at this. Iranian ships struck by Ukraine contained drone and missile components, Kiev's Israel envoy reveals. So look at this. The ship Ukraine struck in the Caspian Sea on Saturday contained components for drones and missiles on their way to Iran. Ukrainian ambassador to Israel, Yevgen Kornichuk, said in an interview with N12 on Sunday. Iran claimed the ship was carrying civilian goods when it was attacked by Ukraine and accused Ukraine of seeking to expand the Russia-Ukraine war. Ukrainian President Zelensky announced the attack on Saturday in a post on X, saying that Ukraine had conducted long-range strikes in the Caspian Sea, including vessels used in military cargo shipments involving Iran. But at that point, we thought it might be referring to the Russian ship that had been hit in that separate incident. Kornichuk stated that this was not the first time Ukraine had hit such military targets and that the expectation is it will happen again, adding that Ukraine views such shipments as legitimate military targets. Israel and Ukraine are fighting the same enemy, Kornichuk said. I found this to be the most interesting sentence of his interview. Israel and Ukraine are fighting the same enemy. That is a kind of clarity that it's refreshing to hear. Yes, it's the same enemy. The Russian, Chinese, Iranian axis is the enemy that Ukraine is fighting. It's the enemy that Israel is fighting. It's the enemy that threatens the West. That's the enemy. It's all one enemy. It's so refreshing to hear someone say it. On Sunday, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi responded to the incident on X, saying that Zelensky has attacked an Iranian commercial vessel, killing a sailor, a blatant UN charter violation done at Israel's behest to drag Europe into its war. In calls with EU High Rep Kallas and Foreign Minister Lavrov, made clear that what the freeloader Kiev did cannot go unanswered, Araghchi added. Lavrov, in a statement posted on the Russian Foreign Ministry's website, offered condolences in connection with the death of the sailor in the attack. Lavrov said Araghchi thanked local authorities in the Russian region of Astrakhan, where the vessel started its journey, for helping the crew, and stressed the need to put an end to such adventures by the Kiev regime. The statement also said Araghchi informed Lavrov of continuing diplomatic efforts aimed at de-escalating tension in the Middle East. Now, here's what's interesting. This comes on the heels of a recent statement from U.S. President Donald Trump. Sorry, there's some honking outside. I once got a comment from one of the viewers saying that he was driving in his car and the honking was dangerous to him. I'm sorry about that. Nothing I can do. This comes on the heels of a recent statement from U.S. President Donald Trump on Truth Social on Friday, in which he claimed that Russian President Vladimir Putin assured him that Russia was not selling weapons to Iran. If they did, it would be very bad for them, certainly not in their best interests, Trump emphasized in the post. And here from Iran International, which is an Iranian opposition website, Ukraine moves to aid U.S. in Iran war after striking Tehran-Moscow supply link. Ukraine is moving more directly into the Iran war, offering to share intelligence about Russian assistance to Tehran while striking vessels that Kiev says form part of the military supply network connecting Iran and Moscow. President Volodymyr Zelensky said Saturday that he would order Ukrainian intelligence to provide partner countries with information showing that Russia had helped Iran prepare strikes against U.S. military facilities and regional states. Quote, I will instruct our intelligence to share with our partners the information we have regarding Russia's new assistance to the Iranian regime, Zelensky said in a post on X. Zelensky and Ukraine had recorded active Russian satellite surveillance of Persian Gulf states and U.S. military facilities there since the beginning of July. He alleged that the resulting images were transferred to Iran and that Russian satellite activity closely corresponded with the Iranian attacks, both before strikes to assist preparations and afterward to assess the damage. And then it mentions that on July, we saw this line already in another article, on July 19th and 20th alone, 4 air bases fell within the area of interest of Russian satellites, 2 in Bahrain, 1 in Jordan, 1 in Kuwait. Zelensky did not publish evidence supporting the allegation, but his pledge to share Ukraine's intelligence with its partners represents a potentially significant role for Kiev in the U.S.-led war against Iran, particularly given Ukraine's experience tracking Russian surveillance systems and countering Iranian-designed drones. So the experts in the world, the country in the world with the most experience defending against Iranian drones is Ukraine. So now they're going to offer help to those countries in the Gulf area, in the Middle East, who are dealing with the same Iranian drones. CBS News reported that Zelensky planned to share evidence with the United States showing that Russia was assisting Iran in targeting U.S. bases in the Middle East. That's the key. His allegation also directly challenges President Trump's recent assertion that he believed assurances from Russian President Vladimir Putin that Moscow was not assisting Tehran. Earlier Saturday, Zelensky said Ukrainian forces had achieved very strong results with the attacks in the Caspian Sea. He said the targets included a Russian warship and vessels used to transport military cargo involving Iran, but did not identify the ships, describe the weapons used, or disclose the extent of the damage. Okay, now let's go a little deeper here. Taken together, the Caspian strikes and the intelligence offer suggests that Ukraine is treating the Russia-Iran partnership as a single military network operating across two wars. Bam. That's what the Israel envoy, Kornichuk, said. Israel and Ukraine are fighting the same enemy, different sides of the same evil axis. Iranian-designed Shahed drones have played a major role in Russia's attacks on Ukrainian cities and infrastructure. Kiev is now alleging that assistance also flows in the opposite direction, with Moscow using its satellite capabilities to support Iranian attacks on the U.S. and regional military facilities. In other words, they are working in coordination. Iran and Russia on both sides. Reuters reported on July 22nd that Iranian drone attacks on CIA facilities in the Persian Gulf have prompted U.S. intelligence analysts to investigate whether Russia assisted by providing targeting information or advanced drone technology. That means that the CIA, Reuters said that the CIA is looking into this. And meanwhile, you have Trump saying, oh, I'm confident that Putin told me they're not helping, which leads me to believe that Trump is saying that for public relations reasons. He wants to, keep things, he wants to keep Putin on a leash, and and he feels that the way to do it is to kind of downplay this, but I'm sure he's paying close attention. The report, citing informed sources, said U.S. intelligence officials have not yet reached firm conclusions about the possible Russian involvement in the attacks on CIA facilities, but they cited the strike's effectiveness and apparent precision, as well as Russia's broader technical support of Iran, as possible evidence. Ukraine has previously offered its drone interception expertise to Middle Eastern countries facing Iranian attacks, drawing on years of experience defending against Shahed-type drones. The Shahed is an Iranian drone. Shahed-type drones used by Russia. Kiev has also increasingly targeted the Caspian Sea as a military logistics corridor, despite its distance from the principal battlefields of Ukraine. In August 2025, so a year ago, Ukraine said it struck the Russian-flagged cargo vessel Port Olya 4 at the port of Olya in Russia's Astrakhan region. Kiev alleged that it was carrying Iranian ammunition and components for Shahed-type drones. 4 months later, Ukrainian special forces said they attacked the Kompozitor Rachmaninov and Askar Sarija off Russia's Kalmyka region. Ukraine said the sanctioned vessels had transported weapons and military equipment between Iran and Russia. Iran has denied supplying weapons for use in Ukraine, while acknowledging that it provided Russia with a limited number of drones before Moscow's 2022 invasion. That's nonsense. Saturday's developments, however, point to a broader confrontation. Ukraine is not only seeking to disrupt Iranian assistance to Russia, but is offering to help Washington and its regional partners expose and potentially counter Russian support for Tehran's war effort. Here's what I'm thinking as I read this. We're going to do one more article before we get to it. This whole issue with selling F-35s to the Turks, right? And I made a couple videos about that. If you've been following the channel, I think a few weeks ago I made one. And the whole issue, the whole reason why it's controversial to sell F-35s to the Turks, the reason that originally the Turks were in the F-35 program and they were removed from it, and there's actually a law It's a legislation. It's an actual law that passed in America that the Turks cannot have them until they get rid of their Russian radar systems. You see, the Russian radar systems, the S-400 that the Turks have, could learn the stealth signature of the F-35s if they're operated together. So one country having both could provide intelligence information that would compromise U.S. security, compromise the effectiveness of the F-35s, and compromise them. And that's why it's such a danger. I'm really sorry about the honking horns. Not a lot I can do about it. I'm not going to redo this video. Sorry about that. Look at this article in the, this is in The Guardian from Friday. How Chinese tech and Russian tactics are aiding Iran's bombing of U.S. bases. As the crisis in the Middle East escalates, Iran has been bombing U.S. bases and critical infrastructure in the Gulf with increasing accuracy, helped by Chinese satellite imagery and tactics learned by Russia in Ukraine. 3 U.S. soldiers were killed last Friday in an attack on the Muwafaq Salti air base in Jordan, which was being protected by a THAAD air defense system. Satellite imagery later released by the Iranian media showed several buildings had been destroyed. It was not clear why the air defense system failed in that incident, which is under Pentagon investigation, but it's a reminder that Iran retains an effective missile capability that its new leadership is willing to deploy. Andreas Krieg, an associate professor at the School of Security Studies, King's College London, said a combination of better intelligence, missile navigation, maneuverability, and coordinated attack planning amounted to a real transformation. It was the product, Krieg said, of 3 years of technological development of Iran's ballistic missile program, which remained roughly 70% intact on U.S. intelligence estimates, despite previous claims from Washington that Tehran's military capabilities had been obliterated. The first step was to use Chinese satellite imagery to help identify targets at U.S. bases and other sites in the Gulf. The U.S. imposed sanctions on 3 Chinese companies in May for providing such images. That didn't make the headlines. This past May, the United States imposed sanctions on 3 Chinese companies for providing satellite images to the Iranians. And yet Trump gets up and says, oh yeah, the Chinese aren't helping the Iranians. One of those companies, Mizar Vision, exposed the presence of U.S. military aircraft and Patriot and THAAD air defense systems at the bases in Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and the Jordanian base hit last week. And imagery released on social media was widely picked up. A string of accurate Iranian attacks on CIA facilities across the Gulf during the bombings made U.S. analysts wonder whether Russia had shared locations with Tehran, but the hypothesis is tentative. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth told Congress this week that China and Russia were helping Iran to some extent. But Donald Trump contradicted him on Friday, saying Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin had personally assured him that they would not sell weapons to Iran. Again, this is a messaging issue. It's not Trump being naive. Got to think, you got to get into Trump's head here. He doesn't want this to be public. And that's why he walked it back. Iran's ballistic program relies heavily on Chinese electronics and ammonium perchlorate for rocket fuel, but the finished weapons are considered sophisticated enough to be able to occasionally defeat stretched U.S. and Gulf air defenses. Iranian missiles boast complex navigation using GPS, China's Beidou, and Russia's GLONASS simultaneously as they launch toward targets. And re-entry speeds, which are several times the speed of sound, always make anti-ballistic defense a challenge. Tehran has also developed steerable warheads that can adjust their course during descent on some of its ballistic missiles, Krieg said. Heat-seeking and optical navigation for the terminal phase means they're not vulnerable to electronic jamming because they're not using radio communication. All this is enough to present a serious challenge for U.S. air defenses at a time when stockpiles of Patriot and THAAD interceptors have been run down by about half after the 38-day U.S.-Israel bombing campaign in the spring. Add in energy sites, oil refineries, desalination plants, and there's a large area to cover. Iran has also evolved tactically in its missile attacks, using methods similar to Russia and Ukraine, where smaller salvos can be more effective than larger ones, and drones are used to distract air defenses, making way for ballistic attack. Kaushal said that he believed it was a case of 2 countries' militaries learning from each other's experience, a convergent evolution, rather than it necessarily being the result of Moscow directly teaching Tehran. All right. So what do we have from all this? Well, what we have is that it appears that what we've suspected all along, that Russia and China and Iran are cooperating in this war, is actually happening. And it's coming to a fore. It's becoming an issue in the war. These American casualties, it appears, are the result of the Chinese and the Russians helping the Iranians be more precise in their strikes. And now you have Ukraine coming in on the side of the United States / Israel, attacking the supply chain of military equipment between Iran and Russia that is apparently still up and running. So yeah, this is quite a development. It seems that the Russia-Ukraine war and the war with Iran, to use the terms of the Ukrainian envoy to Israel, we're fighting the same enemy. It's really one big war, or as Zelensky put it, it's one war on multiple fronts. And I think that's an accurate way to view it. So we'll be watching this closely, and I'll be sure to bring you updates as they come. Thanks for watching. Please share, please like, subscribe. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel and to Israel 365 News channel. Great stuff up there. Please make sure to check all that content out. God bless.